Hello everybody, welcome back to another update. It has been quite a few weeks since I have done an actual check-in, and there is a reason for that. I'm going to go through with you today like my last 4 weeks of data, what's kind of been going on for me, my training, what I've been doing. But then I also have several points that I want to cover at the end of all of that, based on some conversations that I've had actually this week with one-on-one coaching clients. So to give you some insight into what's coming up, I wanted to talk to you guys today about deli meats, because I had a client recently ask if they were appropriate to use, if she'd seen me using them on my story, but she had heard that there was an increased risk of cancers with the consumption of certain types of deli meat. So I'm going to dive right into that and share with you which of the products are safe and which are not so safe, and then talk a little bit about why. And then I'm also going to be going through some of the strategies that I help clients use with managing their stress. These are also strategies that I have personally used during some of the most difficult times of my life that really helped me kind of make, a really big amount of progress in terms of my self-development and coping skills. And then also the last point that I want to chat about is how to reduce your reliance on the scale and tracking macros. As I know so many of you have probably spent many years learning the skill of flexible dieting, and you've got a pretty good foundational knowledge of nutrition, and you're kind of ready to have a little bit more freedom, but do so without kind of compromising your overall health. And I know many of you also still would like to maintain, an aesthetic body composition. So I'll dive into that as well at the end of this check-in video. So before we get to that, I guess I want to go over my data. So if we go and have a look, I've got about 4 weeks. I think the last time I did a check-in with you was sometime around August. So I better scroll down here just to see what I can find. All right, so today's date is the 20th of September. So I'm basically going to be going back and looking at data from all the way back to around the 20th of August. So 4 weeks in total. So I guess the first thing that I want to point out to you is if we look to the left-hand side of my screen, and I'm going to blow it up so it's a little bit bigger here so that you can see it. I'm highlighting a few cells here, and this is the weight column. So you can see that my weight tracking metrics or data is kind of barren, and there's been several reasons for that. So over the last couple of months, we've been going through some really big transitions in my company, and I have had to kind of step in and just take on more of like the administrative role during that transition time. And not to mention, I've also, as you guys know, I think my last check-in, I'd said, I'm in the process of kind of moving, and that is a massive undertaking. I'm actually back in Fort Lauderdale for the next couple of weeks, I think, until I close on my house. But, there was lots of kind of moving going on, and it has just left me extremely time poor. So one of the things that really kind of ends up chopping off the top for me when I am busy is weighing data and then tracking macros. That has been such a struggle just with all of those extra obligations. It's like the few minutes here and there that I would normally, sit down, kind of track my food, or, walk around and find the scale and remember to take my weight. It's just been taken up with all of those kind of administrative tasks. So I don't have a whole lot of weight data, but what I can say is that the last time I consistently weighed in, my weight was sitting at about 138.9 pounds. And I was talking about really needing to refocus and kind of switch it on and get ready for this upcoming competition, which was the Hurricane Pro in St. Petersburg here in Florida. Now that show is in exactly a month from today. I am not going to be competing. So as excited and, optimistic as I was to, do that competition, and I know that it was a big decision for me to even recommit to that because I wasn't certain kind of what the future would hold at the beginning, things have just gotten even busier than I would have predicted. So again, I'm somebody that really wants to try and practice what I preach. And, there are many situations where we will make a decision, we'll, try to commit, and we'll get so far and then we need to kind of, course correct and change our approach. This happens all the time with clients as well. Life is totally unpredictable, and we can't always, see the future. I mean, imagine if we had crystal balls, we would never make any mistakes, but it's not the reality. So I have had to make the decision to, step back away from competing, at least for probably the rest of this year. And also I'm thinking about, we're now moving into the holidays, Thanksgiving is coming up, Christmas. It's just a busy period for business owners. There's just lots of things going on. So I'm actually not saying no to competing forever, but I just need to give myself a little bit of a breather so that I can kind of, re-stabilize things here in my life. Otherwise, I would just be pulling myself in too many directions. So you can see I have done a couple of weigh-ins since, oh goodness, it was like mid-August. So I came in at 138.2 with a couple of weigh-ins over there. And then I come down another week, I was sitting at about 138. And then when I kind of had started to solidify that, you know what, I think I'm done with this competition prep, I kind of let that behavior of hopping on the scale and weighing myself daily. And one of the reasons for that is I don't need to rely on the scale in order to know that I am doing the right thing, that I'm taking care of my body, that I'm fueling myself adequately, and that I'm staying healthy. I do not need that. It's a nice, form of accountability, but it's not something that is essential for me, because if I am focusing on the behaviors, for example, I'm consistently showing up and, opting for high protein foods. If I'm trying to have a balanced diet where I'm making, mostly nutritious, micronutrient rich food choices, but then I'm giving myself some flexibility to have some fun things, the tasty things, the things that are extremely palatable. And I'm committing to a certain number of training sessions per week. And I do that consistently over and over. Nothing major is going to happen to my body composition, and hopefully I will maintain a good bill of health. So this is actually a really different strategy than what I used to have, as few as or as recent as 3 or 4 years ago. I always used to take my weight, and I felt like I needed that. But I was also still navigating and was still in that early kind of post-eating disorder recovery phase. And I didn't have that trust. I wasn't really comfortable or confident in my abilities to auto-regulate. And that has only continued to improve the more I've, placed very intentional efforts on doing so. So right now, I actually don't know what I weigh. My guess is I'm probably sitting at about 143, 142, somewhere in that ballpark. And that's fine. I know that my weight is going to naturally fluctuate depending on the time of the month, depending on my sodium intake, depending on my fiber intake, depending how hard or maybe easy I took it during, my workouts in one particular week, and just my general day-to-day activity levels. So, I guess this kind of moves to the point that I was going to chat about later on in my video, which was reducing the reliance on using the scale. But it helps to kind of, what's the word that I'm looking for? It kind of helps devalue the reliance of needing the scale, because there are so many variables that can influence that number. So, I kind of have just modified my expectations around the idea that my weight is going to fluctuate from one day to the next, and that is really normal. And for that reason, one of the things that I do with clients who are looking to reduce their reliance on taking their scale weight as a form of accountability is to start by setting specific days of the week where they take their weight but letting go of the rest. I usually suggest somewhere between, 2 to 3 weighing days a week at the beginning, and eventually we kind of peel that back all the way to the point where we no longer need to do any scale weighing. And of course, there are some individuals that are a little bit more conservative in that approach, and they might start with 4 or 5, but the goal is to gradually kind of pull back on the frequency, and to the point where they're like, wow, I still feel really good, I'm still performing really well, not a whole lot is actually changing, and now I actually feel so much more, or such a greater sense of peace and freedom, because I don't get this kind of instant negative feedback, when I hop on the scale. Now I've just kind of learned to accept that my body is going to flux and ebb and flow depending on the day of the week or the time of the day, and that's okay. So that's why I don't have any weight data this week. So coming across to have a look at my nutrition, again, this is very loosely tracked. So I was I was half in, I had one toe in the water, the rest of me was out for like a 4-week period here. Like I really wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to commit to it, because there have been days where I've had, a better, clearer slate, and I could have been in the gym doing my HIIT cardio, getting my cardio done and my lifting. And then, something happens and I'm like, there's 2 more days where I've got my head down and I'm just working and I haven't been able to kind of fulfill my nutrition obligations or, the same amount of training intensity and effort that I need to be doing if I was competing. And more importantly, I've just felt very distracted. And when I compete, again, it's a hobby. I love it. I want to be able to do it and do it well and do it in, a good, clean state of mind. And with everything kind of so much change and so much uneasiness, it's just felt a little bit, I don't know, it just hasn't felt comfortable. I'm kind of trying to get a workout done and, I'm getting phone calls or I've got to do all these other extra tasks and I'm on my phone. And I've just been really distracted. So I haven't been able to really focus on my training. So I'm kind of just going through the motions. It's not that I've just dropped the ball and I haven't been going to the gym. It's just been far more distracted training efforts and I'm not really showing up and giving it my best. And that's not how I want to do a prep. And, the rule of thumb generally for competitors is if you are going to get back on stage, you get back on stage and you show up looking better. It's just how it goes. Now, there have certainly been instances where that doesn't always happen. Again, things don't always go perfectly, but that's usually the aim. And I know based on my current circumstances, it wouldn't be my best effort. And, so I'm going to continue to work really hard in the gym and do my best for now. But again, there's something to be said for, being strategic with when we take on, a fat loss goal. And I say the same thing to my clients too, what have you got on your schedule? What's coming up? Do you want to be able to enjoy these, festivities, or have you got some travel coming up, or are there going to be some big transitions and changes for you? And usually, once I've kind of got a clear understanding of somebody's circumstances, that will then better help me decide, is now the right time to be pursuing fat loss? Or certainly, it might be the determining factor as to whether we go, at a really aggressive weekly rate of weight loss or something that's a lot more conservative. And again, it can also change from week to week depending on somebody's position and situation. So what I am very surprised by are the numbers here in the compliance, and it just leaves me to believe I feel like there are a lot of things missing from the foods that I've tracked. So I pulled up my phone, I looked at what I had in there, but I know that, again, I was doing a lot more snacking, picking. I think, certain whole meal occasions, I think, have been missed from some of this data. So it looks like my overall compliance wasn't terrible to the dieting calories, but I suspect we can probably sneak in another like 10% above the totals that we can see here. So for instance, there is a week here back in early to late August where I was at 110% compliance, so 10% over my calorie goals, and my weekly calorie intake was around 1458. I suspect that that's probably closer to like 17 or 1800, to be honest. And you can also see here that my protein compliance has been really low. So again, I haven't had the opportunity to do the same kinds of meal preps that I would normally do. Weekends have been taken up, putting contracts together and, performing certain tasks instead of like doing my groceries and getting meal prep. And it's just been the way of it. So protein compliance has been pretty low. You can see my average has been around 100 grams in that week, 109 grams, and again my target's usually about 125 to 135, which is in the bottom third, I guess, of that protein reference range. And I have intentionally done that because when I was trying to shoot for the top end of the reference range for protein, my relationship with food just plummeted. I didn't feel like I had any balance. I felt really restrictive, and knowing that there's no real downsides or detriments to just picking a number on the lower end of that range for me, I was like, why am I trying to shoot for this when this number down here is perfectly fine? So that's kind of why my protein is a little bit lower anyway, but I'm also probably sitting right on the border of not even being in that range just for these last couple of really busy weeks. You can see here I was only 77% compliant 1 week here, and then my carbohydrates and fats were quite a bit higher. And then there was another week here where I was at 106. So it hasn't been the worst, but I think in terms of like a competitive athlete, like a professional, this is not going to cut it. I am not going to be coming into the next competition if I were to continue to prep this way, looking my best. Like, I'd probably lose a little bit of muscle in certain areas. Not that that's a bad thing for me, because my goal has been to kind of shrink a bit for the bikini competition. But it's not being done like with, I don't want to eat like that, and I don't want to prep in that way. I want to do it properly. I know that I've given it my best. So the other thing that I think is interesting to look at is my fiber intake. So I normally have, somewhere between 25 and 35 grams of fiber. My fiber intake has been around 19. This week wasn't terrible. I think that week I might have prepped something that gave me a little bit more fiber content. It was probably something with like the lavish breads, the Joseph Pitters that I use to help boost that number a little bit. But then back to 18, back to 15 this last week. And then for the 3 days that I've tracked this week, it's looking pretty low on average too. It's around 19. So again, just not a way that's going to allow me to prep sustainably. Like those fiber targets, it's not going to cut it when you are, sub 10% body fat and trying to, you're just hanging on by, the skin of your teeth already, even when your fiber is high. So had I continued to prep and lose body fat, I was just making it harder and harder for myself by also adhering to a low fiber diet. So lots of things here that kind of are the red flag to pull the pin on this prep and, come back when I'm in a better position to have a good red hot crack at it. So that doesn't mean that I'm throwing in the towel. It just means that right now I shift my perspective. So it's not, you're a failure. Oh, you couldn't cut it. You suck. Like, I'm not having those thoughts. It's frustrating, sure. And I'm sure so many of you have, attempted to do a cut, and it's just like, can I just get a break? And it's so infuriating, but life happens. We have to be able to process that, move on, and then shift our focus to something new. So coming over to have a look at my training, and I will talk about, I guess, my new goals and focus for the next couple of months until I am in a better position to prep. The last couple of weeks, we'll go back to the last week of August. I came in at a pretty decent amount of energy expenditure. I was very committed to my walking still, so I was still getting that done, but I'm doing that and multitasking and doing like 15 different things. So I wasn't even looking forwards to going for a walk. Like, I dreaded it. So, that's no way to do a prep. Like, you need to be focused and excited and motivated and have the mental clarity to kind of commit yourself to these requirements. So I was still doing the work, but man, it was, I was bordering on, this is not a sustainable way to do this, or a healthy way, and it's not the way that I want to do it. I still was committed to my HIIT cardio as well. So you can see I was still getting in around 900 calories worth of energy expenditure. And then my resistance training was coming in just under 2,500 calories, and that was with 5 days of training. As we come down a little bit, I managed to hang on for another week here. I was still at 5,300 calories of energy expenditure in total. And again, just to keep you informed, I do track the calories when I go for an intentional 60-minute walk, and it's usually around 300 or so. This week I didn't get my third session in, so I was kind of starting to drop the ball here a little bit. So I came in at 650 calories for energy expenditure 1 week, still performing my lifts pretty consistently, but I was having to go in a lot more frequently. You can see here I went in 6 days just to get to my normal calorie targets and my training volume. And again, that was purely in effect of, I'm in the gym, I'm not focused, I'm distracted, I'm doing 25 other things, and the quality of my training was just, my effort was so low. Even though I wanted to be training at an RPE of 7 or above for my training, if I was being perfectly honest with myself, most of those sessions, I probably was operating at an RPE of 6, maybe like 1 or 2 of the exercises, if I had put my phone down and like be focused for the set, it was back up at an 8 or a 9, but it just wasn't consistent. So that's why I was having to do so much more, to actually get to my calorie goals from my workouts. You can see here, this was a week where I had traveled back down to Fort Lauderdale and I only got 4 sessions in, and this was not my best week. 1,600 calories when I normally expend 1,000 calories more when I'm focused. So it wasn't really great. And here, this is where I'm starting to think, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't sustain it. So it all kind of starts to move back to a more sustainable amount in the coming weeks. I'm still committed to my walks at that point. I still got a couple of sessions in on the stair stepper, but I was down by about 1,000 calories of energy expenditure that week. And then to this most recent week, I have, what have I got here? This is, I think, mostly just planned. I haven't actually finished out this. This is this week. Okay, so this is a present week. All right. So that's where I stop. So things are still moving in the right direction for training, but it is like it's declining at a rapid rate as I've kind of absorbed, some additional responsibilities. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at. I guess my focus moving forwards will be prioritizing my glutes. So I'm still going to be putting together programs that are around 30 sets per week on my glutes. 50% of that volume will be going to my glute medius, glute minimus, and then the other 50% will be to glute max. So I have been that busy that I haven't had opportunity to write myself a program. So what I do is every time I go into the gym, I'm doing full body sessions just to keep it easy to remember and to kind of have a process. I do the first 3 exercises as my glutes and I get about 9 sets, and that's it on my glutes. You don't want to do any more than that on one muscle group. Otherwise, it's kind of like turning your vehicle on and then trying to turn it on even more. Like once your motor units in your muscle group have been completely fatigued and they've signaled muscle growth, doing more isn't going to help. It's like eating more protein, above and beyond your daily requirements isn't going to make you more muscular. So, once we get to a certain set number within a session and we've effectively fatigued all those motor units in that muscle group, that's it. So that's kind of my process. I just go in and I do whatever's available to me. And you can see I've trained at 4 different gyms in this one week. I was at USF, Crunch. I was over at Brett Contreras' gym another week, and then training at my condominium apartment gym another day. So there is no one piece of equipment that's exactly the same. So my volume, it would be all over the place. Like you can't use that as a metric or something. You can't even set a goal like, oh, you should be striving for this amount of volume in those instances, because the machines load differently. The exercises load volume differently, but it doesn't mean that you're not getting progress. What matters is that you are following a consistent weekly set number, and you're focusing on the certain muscle groups that are important to you. So my exercise selection has been quite a bit different the last couple of weeks, but that's not detrimental in any way. I would prefer to be working from a program just so that I don't have to think about it when I get in, but that's been my reality. So I'm just kind of applying some pretty simple procedures to kind of make sure that I'm doing things correctly and checking off all the boxes. Cardio, so how's that going to change? I think that moving forwards, I still really care about cardiovascular fitness. I like the idea of being able to stay cardiovascularly fit. So I will probably do a small amount of high intensity interval training each week. It might be 30 minutes. If I have an opportunity to do another session, I might. There are some associations with high intensity interval training and visceral fat, and I mean that in a positive way. So it's been shown that doing that HIIT workout, those short high intensity intervals, or just high intensity training in general, actually has some association with reducing visceral fat compared to low intensity steady state. I guess they said there are more receptors in your abdominal region that help reduce body fat through HIIT training compared to low intensity steady state. And I think I'll do a video on that kind of breaks down the science with more detail and some references in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my data. I'm feeling pretty good right now. Like that's a big weight off my shoulders because I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. And I think, we all have different tolerances. For some clients, we might have similar goals and, their circumstances look similar on the surface. But, we all have different experiences and tolerance levels. And, I think mine is pretty high. I don't mind taking on a lot of stuff. I think just over the years, I've kind of adapted to that. It's kind of normal and it's pretty standard for me. But for somebody else, as soon as you add in one extra variable, one new stressor, it's like, oh, no, I can't handle it. This is too much. It's too much. And then, those folks are in their mental state and their mental health is suddenly compromised by pursuing a goal of fat loss. So, in those situations, we just have to kind of find a good balance for the person. And I guess that leads me to the point that I wanted to talk about, which were how to manage stress. So, to give some insight, I used to be this person that would procrastinate. I would perpetually worry about things. I had so much anxiety and I would ruminate. So if something bad happened and I felt, a certain amount of discomfort, I would first off keep it to myself. I never wanted to burden anybody else with the stress. I would just keep it all locked up in here, and I wouldn't share. So a big step for me was getting therapy and starting to express how I feel, actually talk about my emotions and, say how I'm feeling. And just the capacity to kind of speak and communicate and have somebody listen was so helpful for me. So if you are somebody that's struggling with how you're feeling and you don't have somebody that you can confide in or talk to, or that has the know-how or the knowledge or the wisdom to kind of help you, get a therapist. Work with a qualified professional, because it will make such a big difference. And you might take a few therapists before you find the right one. I'd given up on therapy. I had 2 or 3 different therapists growing up, and I'd kind of quit for about 3 or 4 years. And then it was just by chance when I was here that I stumbled across this one individual who was just amazing. She was exactly what I needed and was so good with words and can kind of, say back to me what she interpreted as what I was struggling with, but so eloquently. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly how I feel. So that was really, really helpful. But it didn't mean that I still didn't have the skills for how to deal with stress. So obviously part of that for me was binge eating. It was, I needed relief and I needed it now. And I didn't know how to channel that. So I would, to self-soothe and to kind of emotionally detach from the discomfort and the pain and the sadness that I was experiencing, I would, self-soothe with food, because it does give you that positive feel-good experience that we get from, lots of different things, but it doesn't solve the problems. So one of the strategies that I learned, and I think it was actually the therapist that I did A.P.D therapy with, she was great. I just did 10 sessions because I wanted to learn how to better navigate having A.P.D, because I know that it was having some negative impacts on my life. And a lot of it was just, that feeling of overwhelm and just freezing and not knowing how to progress and step forward. I just felt stuck. So there's a strategy, here it is called worry scheduling. Sounds silly, right? Worry scheduling. Put that on your schedule? Yes. So basically what it involves is allocating a set amount of time to the challenging thought, the task, or the thing that you are dealing with. And then once that time frame is over, and it might be just 15 minutes, I'm going to, try and strategize, talk this through with somebody, maybe do some journaling, get my thoughts out. And then once that time is up, gently reminding yourself that you'll address these things in your next thinking window. And I know this isn't groundbreaking, and I'm sure you're sitting here going, oh, well, that just sounds like, I don't know, sure, whatever. It's nothing special. But that really resonated with me. I had that moment like, wow, I allow myself to keep thinking about this stuff. And I was a chronic people pleaser. Like, I hated the idea that someone might be upset at me or worried, and I would think about it and ruminate, and it would ruin my entire day. And not just that, like if I was struggling with a bad, poor body image day, or, I felt down on myself, I would just let it stick with me and ride it out for, days, weeks even. So I decided I can't keep doing that. I need to consolidate this and then practice letting it go. And that has been so helpful for me. Even now, if something comes up that's stressful, I feel really bad for Sam because he's usually with me when I've got to talk about something, and I'm like, and I'll like have my 15 minutes of ranting, and then I'm like, okay, I can't keep talking about this. It's not going to serve any more purpose. It's just ruining our time together, or, you know, it's just taking up mental energy that you don't need to be wasting. And there's nothing you can do about many of our circumstances, right? So yeah, it has really helped me, and I still use that to the day. And, you know, I kind of allow myself to just start thinking about something else. I'm like, okay, all right, well, that's enough thinking about this. What do I need to get on with? Or what is the next thing? Or if it's, you know, coming in, if I'm thinking about something during a time when I'm meant to be, you know, relaxing and, you know, I'm leaving my work brain at home, we're out for dinner or something like that. I have to be very intentional about changing the topic and thinking about something else. And that's been super helpful. But I guess some other things that you can do is just slowing down and pausing for a moment and just doing some big, deep breathing, some belly breathing. I know that I used to think, you know, it's so corny, as if that even works, but there is scientific research that proves that our breathing, and like if we can regulate and control our breathing, that it has a positive influence on our central nervous system. It can slow our heart rate, and it can like literally leave you feeling so much more calm and ready to tackle anything. So breathing is really important, and just giving yourself a moment to pause. I never used to do that. I would just rush, you know, I'm on to the next thing. Now, there are going to be days where you have to do that. So you don't get the 10-minute window of just going laying on the floor and doing nothing. It might be just a moment. You know, it might be 1 minute where I just kind of, okay, I'm going to put things down. I'm going to go get myself a drink, a few big deep breaths, and then you have to keep moving on. But that has been really helpful. And then, of course, exercise. That is such a good stress channeling tool. Which is one of the reasons why I keep doing it, because I know I'm stressed. I know I have a lot going on. So, you know, I try to make time for that a little bit, you know, every day. It's not, you know, it's not always the high intensity, you know, slugging it out session. I try to match my activity with how I am feeling. And I used to set myself this absolutely unrealistic expectation standard that no matter rain, hail, or shine, you've got to perform here all the time. Otherwise you're pathetic. You're worthless. You're not competent. You're inequipped. Like, think of all the negative things that you could say about yourself. That was me. And I realized, like, wow, are you a robot or are you a human? So just kind of giving yourself a bit of compassion on difficult days, and that sometimes it's that little bit of grace, and just like giving yourself unconditional permission to, you know, take it a bit easier today. Slow it down. If you don't get through your whole workout, don't stress. There'll be others, but consistently still showing up. But, you know, just being more mindful of how I am feeling, you know, in the moment. If I went to bed at 1:30 in the morning, which happened just the other night, I had a couple of things. I was looking for houses to rent. Obviously, I'm living with Sam, and I guess I'm back and forth between Fort Lauderdale. It's a mess right now. But anyway, we're looking for a new house, and the only time I had to do it was like midnight, because everything else I had to do for work was taking up all my time. So that afternoon, I remember going down to the gym, and I was 2 exercises in, and I'm like, man, I feel like garbage. And I was getting frustrated and really angry, because I was like, I wanted to have a good session. Like, mentally, I was ready to commit. Like, I, you know, got all my work tasks done. I was in the gym at a reasonable time for a change, and I was so fired up and ready to have a good session, because it had been a day or so since I'd trained. And I was like, I've got nothing. I felt like a pansy. And then I was like, oh, that's right. I went to bed at 1:30. Like, no wonder you feel like this. And just me being intentional with my thoughts and allowing myself the grace and to go, yeah, you know, this is really hard, isn't it? It just changed my whole perspective of that session. Now, nothing turned around, nothing changed for me. I still felt really tired, but it just gave me a bit more peace and comfort to kind of finish the workout and get it done. So that is worry scheduling, guys. I hope that you can take that and use it to your advantage in times of stress and difficulty. Now, the last point that I wanted to talk about, as I mentioned at the beginning, were deli meats. So this, I don't think I've ever done a video on this. I've never talked about it. I've known about it. We learned about it at school, and I've never bothered to communicate this on social media. So here you guys, you've got the first. But there is an association with increased cancer risk, and the World Health Organization classified deli meats as a group 1 carcinogen. And that, let me just make sure I'm reading my notes correctly here, that is due to evidence linking it to colorectal cancer, so stomach cancers as well. So I guess let's talk about some of the key identifying features of some deli meats that lead to these increases in cancer risk. So there are 4 things. The first is sodium. The second is saturated fat content. The third thing are nitrates and nitrites. And then the fourth, polycystic aromatic hydrocarbons. I'm glad I said that slowly. So those are the 4 things that these types of products can be associated with or are a feature of. But it's not all types of deli meats. So you'll see me in my stories making myself ham sandwiches, turkey sandwiches, sliced deli chicken sandwiches. That's kind of the type of deli meat I use. But deli meats also include things like salami, pepperoni. Is it bologna? I don't know. I see this word, and it's at the grocery store. It's a US thing. It doesn't exist in Australia. So when I was looking at the list of these other types of foods or products, I'm like, I don't know how to say it. Bologna, I guess is the spelling. Sausages, and then think like chorizo sausage. Like you can see the fat globules, like that type of meat product. So they all kind of get lumped into one, but the last 5 that I just rattled off compared to the first 3 that I rattled off are grossly different. So I guess the association with the cancer risk from sodium is that is linked to increases in stomach cancer and of course cardiovascular disease. But one thing I do want to say about sodium is that while there is an upper limit for salt, so you'll often hear people say, you don't want to have more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. You want to keep your salt intake, probably somewhere, around 1,400. That's considered, anything less than that is a low salt diet. And I think for the most part, it's not a bad thing to choose products that are, lower in sodium, because they're also usually associated with some other kind of like health quality. So if you're moving towards that food, usually there's something else probably relatively good about it as well. It means that the food manufacturer is giving or paying attention to, at least some of the health qualities of food. But only 5% of the population actually have a need to reduce their salt. And these people are salt sensitive. So it's a very small subset of the population. So not all of us need to necessarily be concerned with high sodium foods, because our bodies are able to effectively regulate and keep our solute load, within the normal range. So if we have something salty, we're able to kind of retain fluid to kind of keep that solute load, stable. Other individuals with a salt sensitivity cannot do that, and that causes increases in blood pressure, and that can obviously lead to increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So that's one of the reasons why deli meats in general have a bad rap. They're high in sodium, which can be bad for us. The other association is the saturated fat content. Now, that is only true of the products that are high in fat. I personally don't choose those products. I choose extra lean forms of deli meat. So I'll use ham, turkey breast, or chicken breast, like shaved chicken breast. So saturated fat obviously is linked to an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and I would encourage people to always choose low fat products, lean protein sources. The current recommendations for saturated fat intake are about 7% of your total daily energy intake should come from saturated fats. If it's less, great. But the recommendation is 7% of your total daily energy requirements. So it probably means that for someone that's about my shape and size, you'd be looking at less than, say, 16 grams of saturated fat per day. It could be less for a smaller person. Now, the other area that I think is less often talked about are these nitrates and nitrites. So these are often added to help preserve the color, to preserve the flavor, or to prevent spoilage. So unfortunately, when we consume these nitrates and nitrites, they have the potential of being converted to another compound that is associated with cancer risk. They are a known carcinogen. So my recommendation, if you're choosing a deli meat, is to choose something that is, I guess on the label it says no added nitrates or nitrites, or it's nitrite free. So you can look for that. There are products, the ones in my refrigerator say exactly that. And again, that's one way of helping to reduce your risk of, taking in these known carcinogenic compounds. And then the last point that I had mentioned were the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So these compounds form when we cook meats at very high temperatures or if they are smoked. So if you think about, smoked honey ham or, some kind of smoked such and such, like a lot of them have, these high cooking temperatures applied to them to kind of achieve their taste and texture and so on and so forth. So unfortunately, again, there is direct evidence to show that these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons are linked to cancer. So if you are going to have a deli meat, then I would recommend looking for some that have on the label uncured. So they are uncured deli meats. They have no added nitrites, no nitrites or nitrates. I would choose options that are not smoked. So I would limit your consumption of smoked varieties or the cured varieties, because these are more likely to contain those carcinogenic compounds. So I hope that kind of gives you some perspective on lunch meats, because, there was a period many years ago, like I'm talking when I was, 20, where there was a lot of buzz around this and everyone was like, don't eat deli meats, don't eat lunch meats, they're terrible for you, or all meats are bad, you're going to get cancer. And they are still, to the date, on the World Health Organization Group 1 list of carcinogens. But it is very specific types. So if you are somebody that has, religiously enjoyed salami, I mean, gosh, I've had my fair share growing up with, platters and crackers and cheese and on the saturated fats and the salt. Like, I've had enough of it in my life. So I don't think that I'm completely, risk-free, but I have, I have adopted these new behaviors around choosing those types of foods to help lower my risk of disease. So there you have it, guys. I think that's about all that I have for you for this week. If you have any questions about your own health and fitness journey, maybe you are somebody that is struggling with a lot of stress right now and you're just like feeling stuck and not, confident in your decisions moving forwards with your goals, or maybe you are somebody that is interested in learning about how to reduce your reliance on scale weighing or anything at all, please feel free to leave me a comment. I will say right now I have just kicked off or launched, the campaign for our, Empower 30 $50,000 challenge. So we have teamed up with Solon, who are our sponsor for this event, and they are going to be giving away $50,000 worth of prizes to, the people that sign up for this challenge. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about that, please reach out to me. I've got a post on my Instagram page that kind of tells you all about it, but just very briefly, you'll receive access to my Miss Bikini Olympia program. It is using the Solon app. It does not use Be a Fit My app. It's using their app, but my program has been, added in. You've got all my exercise videos, all of that stuff's available to you. You'll also get some of my cardio programs for the challenge as well. The mobility are in there if you're somebody that's kind of feeling a little bit sore and beat up and you need some support with mobility. And then my educational guide. So that comes with an Audible form and video tutorials to kind of help you do all the math and learn. So it is a DIY self-guided program. You'll get access to one of my books with all of the recipes and then weekly live Q&A sessions. So you're going to have support. I've already seen in the community, there's 40 people that have already signed up just in the last couple of days, which is awesome. People are saying hello. People are introducing themselves. It's going to be fantastic. So I'm really excited. I think we've kind of found a really good price point where it's really affordable for everybody, and not to mention $50,000 worth of cash prizes. So it's a 6-week super short challenge. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please get signed up. And before I finish, if you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please give the little bell, a subscribe, that's what you call it. If you've got questions about Be a Brain, our research review, or you're interested in subscribing and learning the most up-to-date scientific research on topics related to nutrition and exercise science, go and subscribe. It's $12.99 a month. You will learn so much by being a member. We'll give you 4 topics. They come available with a convenient Audible form as well. So if you're busy and you're on the go, you can be listening in the car, commuting to work, out on your walk. You can listen and learn and do all the things at the same time like I do. It's very helpful. And of course, coaching. If you would like to sign up for one-on-one coaching, please reach out to my team at BIABODY. We have our coaching team. I'm still coaching. We've got all kinds of great packages starting from 6 weeks duration all the way through to a year. We really are trying to accommodate different price points. I know the economy sucks right now. People are really struggling. We're hearing it left, right, and center. I've had so many conversations with, other business owners as well, just saying things are really slow and people are struggling. So we wanted to make sure that you guys can still keep your health and fitness top of priority so that you don't end up, degrading and ruining your health, out of not having the means financially to get good, sound, evidence-based coaching. So please feel free to reach out to us if you've got questions about one-on-one coaching. I'm obviously taking on new clients, as are my coaches. Right now, we are ready and waiting for you. But I guess I'll see you at my next week's check-in.